Hey guys, it's Valkrin. Patch 4.1 is here, and I'm going to talk about the changes. So the first change I'm going to talk about is Anivia. Now the Anivia changes were overall just quality of life, amazing buffs to Anivia. Her ultimate has the Orianna treatment now. You can see when you're about to move too far away to cancel her ultimate. W mana cost normalized at 70. Her Q had a mana cost buff. And probably the most exciting part about this is the projectile speed has been increased for Anivia. Anivia was one of the hardest champions to last hit with because her auto attacks would move so slowly. You'd have to really practice Anivia to get perfect CS with her. But now that it's been increased a little bit, she feels much better to last hit with. The Annie nerfs were specifically targeted towards support Annie for early game and laning phase, and they are quite effective. Basically during laning phase, it's between levels 1 and 9 as a support. So now your stun is only going to be between 1.25 and 1.5 during laning phase. Now after laning phase, Annie has been buffed. You know, late game Annie past level 16 is very, very effective right now. If you have max cooldown reduction, your ultimate will have a 48-second cooldown. Tippers can last up to 45 seconds. So you can almost have a permanent pet out. The Evelyn nerfs were huge because her E now does physical damage. This is a huge nerf to her because the best way to build Evelyn was to go Magic Pin. Evelyn doesn't have good AP ratios, so she scaled really well with Magic Pin because the percentage-based damage on her ultimate and the low cooldown on her Q. But now that her E does physical damage, you can no longer go the standard Magic Pin build on Evelyn, which is a huge nerf to her overall damage output. This might be the nail in the coffin to Evelyn that makes her very, very rare in solo queue. Jana has the Katarina ultimate treatment. Katarina's ultimate was changed, so it previously, it would take time to ramp up to use her ultimate, but they changed it so it starts doing the damage immediately when you cast it. Same thing with Jana. As soon as you start casting her ultimate, it'll start healing, but they reduced the total duration to compensate for the fact that you immediately start healing. So you're really getting like one tick as soon as you activate it. The Jinx nerfs were pretty minor compared to where they could really hit Jinx. In my mind, Jinx's real power came down to her Q, her passive, and her ultimate, and then the poke damage you could do with her W. All of that combined with her Flame Chompers, she had a very effective kit overall for an AD carry just to stomp solo queue with. But what these nerfs were targeted towards was they wanted to nerf her level 2 all-in. They reduced her base health, and they also made it so her Flame Chompers will do less damage early game and have a more normalized and longer time to arm. So last patch you could play Jinx Thrash. Thrash would land the hook, and Jinx would just put Flame Chompers on it, and you'd kill them at level 2. This is sort of trying to prevent Jinxes from being able to just stomp lane as early as level 2. However, Jinx is still incredibly powerful. The Nasus nerfs were targeted towards pretty much Nasus being a huge threat to AD carries in late game. Nasus's range on his Wither was so long that in some circumstances you could just be in the general vicinity of the AD carry, wither them, take them out of the team fight. They're trying to make it so Nasus can't just do that. You have to get a little bit closer as Nasus, give more breathing room for the enemy AD carries. Tank Rengar pretty much removed from the game. This nerf completely makes empowered Battle Roar very, very useless during laning phase. So going Tank Rengar, not very great right now. And they made it so you can no longer just hold on to your empowered Q and do the triple Q. The Riven nerfs were actually pretty significant. They're deceptively not as effective as you think and the changes, you have to be careful about how you read it. This now does total attack damage from bonus. So although it looks like it's a huge nerf from 40% from the normalized 70, it's actually total attack damage. So it's not the end of the world. Riven's still going to be pretty powerful. But this is actually a really nice nerf to Riven's early game. The Shyvana nerfs, basically just trying to cut down on top lane Shyvana's power. They're trying to really get away from those Mundo, Renekton, Shyvana top lanes. They're trying to give more availability to other picks. Thrash actually got a buff, and this kind of boggled me because when I saw Thrash in the patch notes, I was like, okay, what are they going to do to make Thrash a little bit weaker? But in fact, they're making Thrash stronger. They're making it so the lantern is going to be, an object. You can't put words on it. You can't stand on it as an enemy. You basically can't stop people from taking the lantern now. And I think that is actually a pretty big buff to Thrash. They did make it so when you take the lantern, you get to the location a little bit later, But I think overall this is a buff because previously if the Thrash would throw a lantern to an ally, you could like flash on it or put wards on it to stop them from taking it. Now you can't do that. Yasuo got some, or Yasuo got some pretty decent buffs because I don't know, like there were some wonky things with his Q, and overall like what they're doing with the ultimate is as soon as you get max flow, which means a shield, they just gave some nice quality of life buffs to it. And to be honest, Yasuo is pretty dang effective if you can play him well. The main downsides of Yasuo is you have to put him mid right now. To be honest, if you put him top, he'll get crushed by tanks. You put him mid, so you're going to be lacking an AP carry unless you figure out a way to fit it into another role. So having Yasuo is kind of a downside if you get behind. However, Yasuo is very, very effective mid to late game team fights because you can block almost anything with his wind wall, and if you use it correctly, you can take the enemy AD carry out of the team fight completely by wind walling in front of them, and all their auto attacks will just be nullified. The other big change I want to talk about is actually on Talon. Now this one is huge, and this one I was actually looking for because people were talking about this a lot. The main argument that Talon mains had before was that when you would use Cutthroat, which is his E ability, you'd be too close to your target. You would rake immediately after, and sometimes your rake wouldn't hit them because you'd be directly on top of them. But now that you teleport further behind them, you can now correctly do your combo really quickly and effectively on Talon. And Talon's actually a pretty big counter to a lot of AP mids and a lot of champions right now. So you're going to see Talon surge in popularity because, I mean, this is a huge quality of life buff to Talon, and Talon mains were already pretty frequent in some parts of solo queue, so this is just a huge buff to Talon, to be honest. Other than that, the item changes. Spirit Visage had the cooldown reduction halved, pretty significant for tanks. Sunfire has much weaker damage early game. You know, having a normalized 40 was pretty nice, but now it has a scaling ratio on it. It's a pretty big nerf, to be honest, for tanks. The other last change I want to talk about has to do with Spirit Stone. Now, deceptively, Spirit Stone looks like it's an overall just complete buff. But you have to keep in mind that the passive health and mana regen that you'd previously get on Spirit Stone would work regardless of whether or not you were jungling, ganking, or anything. Now that the sustain has been completely built into a jungle item, you no longer get that sustain while you're roaming or doing anything like that. To get that sustain, you have to actively be jungling, which, you know, can be a nerf in some eyes if you realize the fact that you won't be getting sustain for the whole duration of when you're roaming to gank and when you gank, which is what you would get previously with the health and mana regen on Spirit Stone. So other than that, the Spirit of the Spectre Wraith got a pretty big buff too. It now gives a ramp up power, 2 ability power for every large monster you kill. Just more of an incentive to get that item, help out the AP junglers. Anyways guys, the rest of the changes are for the other maps. Let me know what you guys think, and I hope you guys enjoy this patch.